Besides the netters of Egypt and show you we're talking about the same system.
Jesus is a name which did not come into existence in the English form until the 1600s. The letter J was not invented until the 1600s. Let me say this again. Now, the letter J was not invented until the 1600s. So the reality is Jesus is not the name of that person. His name is an Amharic name, Yeshua.
1482, Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint a painting of Christ and the 12 disciples. This was 1482, 10 years before Columbus set sail, because that painting would be the greatest weapon used in colonialism, and still is right now, because many black people around the world still have that original Last Supper. And so when Leonardo was asked to paint that picture, he got his uncle to actually sit in, and this is an historic record. He got his uncle to sit in and pose as Christ, and he got 12 criminals from a local jail who happened to be available to sit in as the 12 disciples.
The only reason you call God by that name is because your former enslaver, your former oppressor, taught you that name. He never taught you the real name. He never gave you the keys to the power to free yourself spiritually, so that you are now spiritually or religiously still a slave.
The African population in North America is the third largest black population in the world in any geopolitical state. Why don't we have a single word out of one of our languages for God that we use? The Arabs use their word for God. The Jews use their word for God. The Catholics use their word for God. The Japanese use their word for God. The African is the only population that don't have an African word for God. Yet, studies coming out of Geneva over the last 30 years prove that we are the most spiritual people in America, in the world, not just America. We worship with a greater propensity than any other people in the world, but we don't have a single word in our language for our divine.
The word Christ is a title. It's not a name. Christ means the anointed one. And there were many people before the birth of Jesus who also bore that title, Christ. There were 16 people who were known as Christ. So Jesus was the last of saviors of mankind, saviors of a group of people who were known as Christ.
When you talk about the image of Christ, it is important that we no longer ascribe to the European image of Christ. Why? Because the brain is an associating organism. It stores everything as pictures. And because it is associating, if you force feed an African child that Christ is white, because the brain associates, as that child begins to grow, the brain will associate white Christ with white people. And so if white Jesus is God, then white people must also be the gods of humanity. And so guess what? The power in the painting is transferred to the people who resemble that painting. And so it is difficult to pray to a white Jesus and not in some way feel inferior to white people. And that's why when I talk to Christian ministers, I often tell them you have to change these pictures. They say it don't matter. Of course it matters. Why do you think the European went around the world and systematically altered the image of Christ in every major cathedral, every major church, every corner of the globe? Because it is difficult to oppress a people whose image of the God doesn't look like the oppressor. But when God and the oppressor look one in the same, then the people will come to believe that the oppression was ordained by God.
What we find is that in this story that came out of Kemet, after Aset reconstituted the body of her husband Asar, the spirit of Asar came and impregnated his virgin wife, Aset. And then 9 months later, the virgin Aset gave birth to her son, Heru. And Heru was born 4,000 years ago on December the 25th.
So in 325, it was decided that Jesus Christ would be a son of God. In 325, it was decided that Jesus Christ would be born in the manger in Bethlehem. Up until the Nicene Council, most people believe that Jesus Christ was born in a cave in Ethiopia, even in Ethiopia till today.
Christmas was not celebrated in December 25th for hundreds of years. It was celebrated in August. They moved it to December 25th because that's the Egyptian celebration of the birth of the son of the sun, talking about Heru and Asaf.
The image that we have of Santa Claus is the rosy-cheeked European jolly guy, and that image was created sometime in the early 1800s. But the real Santa Claus was a man by the name of St. Nicholas. And when I do research about St. Nicholas, the real St. Nicholas, the further back I go, the blacker St. Nicholas gets. And when you look at pictures and portraits of St. Nicholas in museums in Europe, St. Nicholas is totally black. And there's a museum in Italy that has an old painting of St. Nicholas, and he has like dark skin, woolly hair. So people have to realize that the Santa Claus that we know and love today is based on a black saint from Europe.
The Council of Nicaea.